Britton.
Never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Get on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
There is no parent I'd rather be talking to right now than Tim Britton of that Athletic. He's parenting. He's been parenting his butt off. Congratulations, Tim, on all your parenting. Yes.
It's been a lot of parenting this offseason.
January was the month of baseball inactivity and Tim Britton parenting. So yes. There you go. Yeah. And one was more exciting than the other. One was more exhausting than the other. I guess, that's the thing about, Tim, when you and I, because we're relatively the same age, but you and I were coming up. No, but it wasn't that long ago where January, everything was done. January was pretty easy. We did the Hall of Fame stuff, which maybe we can talk a little bit about. But we did the Hall of Fame stuff, but really January is done. And this year, January was inactive in a large way, but that doesn't mean it was done, and we're still going. And that's the thing that's kind of sucks about this, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that shifted. The calendar has gotten later. I mean, this offseason did move a little bit more swiftly than we've seen in years past.
Early.
Certainly the week of the winter meetings, there was more movement. But it's like the guys who have hung out there are still out there. I know at the Athletic, we've got our top 40 big board of free agents. And whereas last year it felt like there were still 11 of them available at the start of February. This year there's only 3, I think, left.
Okay.
But there's been I think by Christmas there were only 6 left. So
yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
It feels like if you haven't signed by December 15th, okay, you're going to be right up against the start of spring training in another 6 weeks.
I think that I forget who it was. Maybe it was Rosenthal, who I saw the clip saying there's not enough jobs and there's too many guys. Yeah, I mean, you keep really, really close tabs. You do the projections for all these guys for the top free agents. I don't know. I mean, that seems we always kind of feel that way. I don't know if that's a reality, but it does feel like not only are there a few bigger name guys, there's a lot of lower tier guys, and I don't think it's all. Well, once this guy signs, once Bregman signs, once Alonso signs, the dam is going to break. I don't know. I mean, I think that some guys might be kind of crap out of luck a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've moved past that. You're waiting for the one guy to sign for everything to happen. Even with Alonso and Bregman, you struggle to find where is the right fit for them. If certainly doesn't seem like Houston's going to sign Bregman. They're saying they're not. And the Mets have been pretty distant with Alonso over the last couple of weeks now, even though if there is a fit there, you would think. So it is the trickle down to, it's the middle class of free agents that have bore the brunt of this for several years now, where, teams a lot of the time want to try out their guy just coming up from the minor leagues, their top 100 prospect. They want to see what that player has rather than
more so, right?
A guaranteed deal.
It feels like more so, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more of a trust and a willingness to give a player with less experience time and a feel that the 32-year-old veteran, like the opposite of this is what the Orioles did in signing Ramon Laureano, right? Like would you rather have Laureano or Heston Kjerstad as your opening day outfielder? And I think, most people, there are a lot of people who think, well, it should be Kjerstad, obviously. But, Laureano gives them a level of security, a little security blanket in case it doesn't work out for a younger player.
Well, all right. So you do an excellent job of predicting the deals for the free agents. Congratulations.
I'm not sure that your statement is totally accurate this offseason.
All right. Well, you did try to predict it. I mean, that was accurate.
I'm not sure I did an excellent job.
It's like the kid. I'm the kid in the runway. Good effort. Good job. Nice job. Good effort. But I feel like last year believe me, I'm not saying you didn't do a good job this year, but last year it was easier to predict. I felt like and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but last year it felt like you were able to you put a lot of time and research and effort into really, really understanding what the deals are going to be. And last year maybe was a little bit easier. This year was a little bit off kilter. How did you land with everything, do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting. I remember asking David Stearns at the winter meetings, like, was he taken aback by the prices of free agents? Because it's like I was low on most everyone who had signed at that point. Actually, I think Yusei Kikuchi was like the first bigger name to sign, and I had predicted it on the dot. I got the exact thing right, and I was like, "Yeah, 1-for-1.
That's
This
right.
is going well."
That's right.
And I'm like 1-for-40 now, because everyone
Are
else
you
has
low?
signed for
Have you been low on everything, pretty much?
pretty much not guys who have signed later. Jack Flaherty,
Yeah.
I predicted more than what he got. But in general, I've been low on most people, and like that's not like I look at what other people, the good people at ESPN and Fangraphs and other sites, what they projected for people, and they've also been low on most guys, especially the guys who signed earlier in the offseason. And so I asked Stearns in Dallas in December, like, are you taken aback by the pricing? And he goes, I feel like we asked this question a lot on December 8th or whatever it was. And then it gets to a point in late January where everyone's talking about how there's no one to sign any of these guys anymore. And guys are taking substandard deals. And that's kind of where we are now. Like a guy like Flaherty, who I think I projected for like 4 years and $92 million, signs for, 2 and basically 45 back with Detroit. So, I think in general, like it was difficult. Like Soto was difficult because it was such a one-of-one kind of contract that I felt pretty good about projecting just over $600 million, and he only got 25% more than that. But you feel like you're not that close on that. And a lot of the other guys who signed right away was kind of like, oh, like that. Even a guy like Frankie Montas at the Mets signed. I was thinking that was 1 year, 13 or 14 million. He got 2 for 34. And there was kind of a run of pitchers like that who got, man, that's an extra year than I thought. It's 4 extra million per year rather than like 1 or 2 or one or the other. And so it was difficult to kind of price in what inflation was going to do. And I'm going to sit down and try to figure out what I did wrong and do better next year.
Listen, don't be so hard on yourself. You did an excellent job. I'm here to build up. So before I get to, I'm going to ask you what player you think left is really going to fall short of what we all expected, including yourself. But before you do that, I want to know, without the numbers in front of me, what you had for Bregman. What do you have for Bregman?
I believe it was 7 for 189,
Okay.
7 for 182 or 7 for 189. I can't.
And what do you
remember.
have for Alonso?
Alonso had 5 and 140.
Okay. So the obvious answer to the question which I just posed, like who is going to fall short, are those two. But I see other guys out there too. Nick Pivetta, qualifying offer attached. How's that going to work? There's other guys. So who are some of the guys you feel are sort of going to, when the musical chair stops, are going to be like, oh man, that didn't really work out as you had planned.
Alonso was the one really at the start, even at the start of the offseason. What's happened with Bregman surprises me a little bit. Even what's happened with Pivetta surprises me a little bit because of the way like his stuff numbers look.
But everyone's freaking out about that. And that's why they didn't get the qualifying offer.
Right.
I remember. I think were you there in San Antonio? I can't remember.
I was not. No.
Okay, well, we were in San Antonio. I remember when that went down, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, what a great move! Good move! Yeah, good move! Your stuff. Everyone loves his stuff. Everyone is identifying this guy as the diamond in the rough, and he's going to have everyone go after him." And you're sitting there, and remember, let's not forget, Jordan Hicks got what 4 years last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like $10 million a year, whatever it was, but still, it was 4 years, and that was a relief pitcher going to be a starter. We have Clay Holmes. And I get the whole qualifying offer thing, but the qualifying offer, it seems really screwed this guy.
Yeah, and it's like how teams evaluate pitchers. Like I do when I try to project contracts, it's basically off of their wins above replacement and how they match up against other guys who've hit free agency, in terms of age, in terms of like 1, 3, and 5 year production levels. But how teams evaluate pitchers, it feels less and less like it's what concretely happened on the field in terms of numbers that we see on a regular basis and are used to dealing with ERA, WAR, even strikeout percentage and walk percentage, like the basics that you or I might analyze by, and looking more at, okay, how does their stuff play? What might we be able to add to their mix? How have they changed? Evolved? The Mets' interest in Clay Holmes derives from him kind of changing up his mix a little bit later in the season, thinking now that he could be a starter. Like, it's those things that we don't dive into with the same level of granularity that teams do. And so a guy like Pivetta, who you think, because teams evaluate a guy that way, might be more interested in. I think I projected him for, I want to say, like 3 years and $54 million, something like that.
With the idea, when you did that, did you have a sense? Was that with the qualifying offer attached?
I think it did. I think my projections came out before the QOs were handed out, but I thought there was a chance he would get one.
Yeah.
But there is always kind of that guy that gets suppressed by it. I think Uvalde it happened to a couple of years ago when he signed with Texas for 2 years. But that there has been so little about Pivetta out there, really, that we don't even know like what teams are interested in him, really, has been surprising.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking that, and I don't think this is going to happen, but with the Red Sox, you obviously don't, as the only team that doesn't have to give up a draft pick, do you say to them, all right, we'll bring you back, you can be a relief pitcher, which I would think would be an intriguing thing, to be honest with you. I don't think he would want to do it, but it would be an intriguing thing to have that guy at the end of a bullpen. But we'll see. I don't know. But, let's come back to Bregman and Alonso, specifically Alonso, the guy that you cover for the Mets. So you have put him at 5 years, right? I mean, the perception of Pete Alonso has so dramatically changed in the last year, even though Pete Alonso has done very little wrong. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I think it's over the last 2 years, because you look at what his numbers have been. I think in 2023, the batting average was way down, the on-base percentage was down, the power was still pretty much the same. And you could have said, like, and I did when looking at it, man, like his batting average on balls in play, it was, I think, the second worst of this century for a full season. And so you would have said, okay, like he's not going to be a 300 BABIP guy, but he's not going to be, I think it was something like 210 or something, his BABIP for the season. But if he gets that to just like 260, then his batting average jumps 30 points, and he's hitting 250 instead of 220. That's a big difference for a guy like that. The on-base jumps. The power is always going to be there. And the BABIP normalized in 2024, but the batting average was still below 250, and the power dropped. And there's such a big difference between a 45 to 50 home run hitter and a 30 to 35 home run hitter. It's like 30 to 35, we can find a guy to do that. Yeah. 45 is there's 5 guys in the league.
That's called a Hunter Renfroe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a non-tender candidate.
Yeah.
And like David Stearns has non-tendered Chris Carter in the past off a 35 home run season as a first baseman. And so with Alonso, when I said 5 for 140, the WAR doesn't really support that. Like, he's not in the same class as Matt Olson, as Freddie Freeman, as Paul Goldschmidt, and certainly not in the same class as like Prince Fielder and Mark Teixeira, who were some of the guys that Scott Boras wanted him compared to when they hit free agency. Not in terms of wins above replacement. You had to look more at power strictly, or OPS plus, just the offensive side of the game. And I thought, some team is going to buy that argument. It might take a little while, but some team would buy that argument. But if there was going to be a guy who fell into the same trap that some of Boris's players did last year in, the Matt Chapmans, Blake Snells, Jordan Montgomerys, Alonso really fit that, because a right first baseman is always polarizing. A guy whose power dips, a guy who's had 2 seasons that feel a little bit more normal than he had been previously, and a guy who's entering his 30s at a position and a skill set that doesn't age great. That guy's not going to sign for 8 years. And I think there was, just reading between the tea leaves of what his representatives had said, they were looking to sign for 7 or 8 years. So it's not a surprise to me that there's this dissonance between how he values himself and how the industry does. I just thought that somewhere along the line, one team, I thought like the Nationals were a team that might make a play for him, a team that's trying to kind of buy some viability in their market. Might make that kind of move, or that the Mets would understand that, hey, this is a guy who's a couple home runs away from being our all-time franchise leader in long balls, the kind of home run hitter we've never had. We can afford to pay a little bit more for that if we need to, but they've held the line pretty firm.
As the season went on, what was the vibes you got when it came to the Mets relationship with Alonso? And not relationship like, oh, he's a bad guy, or we're gonna, just in terms of how he was going to be valued by the Mets when the offseason rolled around. What were the vibes like as the season progressed?
It was like professional, not warm and fuzzy, not cold, but professional. Alonso did not want to speak about his contract. He never really indulged in talking about it. The Mets said basically at the start of the season, like, we're happy to have Pete play out the season. What's best for us is that Pete, what's best for us is what's best for him, that he has a great season and he hits free agency and he gets rewarded handsomely by us or someone else. And so, like the Mets have had other guys, like Jacob deGrom was much more outspoken about his contract negotiations when he got his initial extension with the Mets. But it was kind of the same. Like Brandon Nimmo did the same thing a few years ago, and I actually talked to Nimmo in spring training last year, and I said, like, what is it like to play out your contract year like this? And he said something really interesting. Like it's like as deep down logically that you're going to hit free agency and you're going to be judged on 6 or 7 years of your baseball career, but when you're in an 0 for 20 in June, all you're thinking about is how much money this is costing me. And I thought that was, Brandon is a pretty level-headed guy, as you know. And so I thought that was really interesting to hear that. And I do suspect, and Alonso has not said this, and I don't think he ever would, that probably played a part in the season that he had, because you saw it really manifest itself. He's much worse with runners in scoring position this year in 2024 than he had been previously. He'd been a very good clutch hitter for them previously, and he wasn't for the majority of the season in 24. He did make up for that with one very, very, very clutch hit in the postseason against Milwaukee. But I do think that he probably pressed a little bit more than he had in years prior. And then, if the Mets or another team signs him, they're probably going to get a better version of him, at least in 2025, than we've seen most recently.
Do you think that they are undervaluing the presence of him? Like, this is the ultimate, as you said, you just cited all the analytics, all the numbers, the position, the type of player and everything. But sometimes there's a guy that just fits, right? It just fits right. Clubhouse, position, skill set. Okay, it just fits. And do you think that they are valuing him enough in that respect? Because, yeah, you got Juan Soto. Yeah, you got these pitchers. That's great. But we know what fit last year. We know that the Mets had the right concoction of players, and Pete Alonso was part of that. Not to say that you have to keep him, but let's not sleep on maybe the glue that maybe Pete Alonso was in some ways, right?
And just the importance of sheer power when you get into the biggest games of the season. You can say a lot. It's always interesting to say about a guy who had I forget what he ended up in the regular season, 34 home runs. That was a real down season for him. He had 34 home runs. He was a linchpin to their lineup for the majority for a large chunk of the season, and he played every game. And that's another thing about Alonso that I think is easier to glide past is his durability as a player. I don't know it offhand, but I think he's been on the injured list twice in 6 years. And he's come back from both of those pretty swiftly. So he's an everyday presence in the middle of your order. And when it gets to October, when you're not putting together 5-run rallies with 7 singles like the 2015 Royals, it's nice to have a guy who can take a first pitch changeup on the outside third of the plate from Devin Williams and hit it over the fence to right field, hit it out over the fence the opposite field. Like Alonso did in the wild card series. So I think, it's very easy to pick apart the holes in his game. And I always come back to, well, he's got, at one of the most important skills in the game, he's one of the 5 or 6 best in baseball at it.
That's a good point. So let's talk about the other guy who's out there as we sit here right now, is Bregman. And what do you say you had it projected at?
7 for 182 or maybe 189.
So
it's 26 or 27.
Listen, I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke. Like, you are usually right near or on all these things. You're right around where these guys land. And I think so. What I'm saying is that when Bregman in the offseason started, I think a lot of people say, okay, that's cool. That's good. That, that's where he'll land. And I don't think he's going to make it. I think that teams are, with the exception of Toronto, are saying, sure, we'll give you 4 years at high AAVs. Um, and I think that Scott Boras is trying to get the years up. That's what he should. I don't think that Bregman wants to go to Toronto. I don't know that, but it's an educated guess. What was interesting about this, Tim, was the Houston dynamic of it, because Houston signs Christian Walker and they sign Isaac Paredes, and they on the record say, "Hey, nice knowing you, Alex Bregman." Basically, after doing that, and then a couple weeks ago, you hear offer still on the table. Tuve's working out in left field. Here's an image of him and everything else. And if the 6-year offer is still on the table, he clearly likes it in Houston. Everyone wants him in Houston. You have a Hall of Famer willing to change positions. He's going to go back there. And then 2 weeks go by and wait a second, he hasn't signed. And you still are hearing the same thing, which is lower years, high AAVs. Sure, Alex Bregman, if you want to come to Chicago or Boston, one of these places that on those terms, then fine. It just made me it's such a bizarre thing when it comes to the Houston dynamic of this. And I'm not saying this happened, but I can't ignore that sometimes this does happen where a team tries to help the player. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I've been part of this. A team tries to help the player and tries to help their market when they know that the market isn't going the way of the player. I don't know if that happened, but we're trying to figure all this out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's been confusing to see his free agency because, you think that the numbers, again, another guy who hasn't probably been at his very best the last couple of years. You probably go back to 2019 for his best season in the major leagues, when everyone had their best season in 2019 because the ball was flying out.
Yeah.
But a guy who brings a lot of those intangibles, how Alex Cora has spoken so glowingly about Bregman for a long time, that would, when you have a really solid baseline of numbers, and then you bring all of that other stuff to the field. The guys who have played with you generally like playing with you, that people have coached you and managed you generally like coaching and managing you. That would be broadly appealing to a lot of teams. And there were enough teams that needed a versatile infield. It's not like he's like Alonso, where he's married to one position that he doesn't play particularly well defensively.
No, he was he can play second. Yeah, he'll play good. He'll play great second. Who cares?
Yeah, he can play second, can probably play short in a pinch.
Right.
There are probably other teams who were planning on starting worse defensive shortstops than Bregman would be. And so, I'm a little confused that his market hasn't expanded the way that I expected over the course of time. And Houston, it's been a weird offseason all around for them, the Kyle Tucker trade and kind of just what their plan is for the next few years. Eludes me at this moment. I don't know.
You're so polite.
If there is a plan,
it's Dana Brown, I like you personally. I respect your opinion, but what you're doing eludes me.
I don't get it at this point. Of course, roll out the baseball, they'll win 90 games, win the AL West again, because that's what they do. I'm not sure exactly who they're clearing the deck for, because they don't have the farm system. We saw last year a lot of the guys that were filling in at various junctures were not it. And so I'm not sure what the plan is for them if they don't, if they continue on this track and don't sign Bregman, and then what the plan is for Bregman if it ends up being Toronto or Boston or Detroit on one of those shorter deals with an opt out or something.
So what other free agent that we haven't mentioned intrigues you the most as we sit here?
I'm trying to think who else is out there still.
Honestly, Flaherty was an interesting one.
Yeah.
Flaherty was, I think a lot of people in baseball were Jack Flaherty, especially in the last couple of weeks before he signed, was becoming more vocal and more out there in social media, what's going on. But and he landed back at a place where it sure seems like he loves being in Detroit. He credited Detroit for a lot of his success of changing how he pitched and revitalizing his career. Because I remember talking with him in the Dodgers, and everyone says, "Oh, Dodgers! Oh, you go to the Dodgers. It's incredible because they make you the best version of himself." And he said, "No, Detroit made the best version of myself." So good for him, but still, it wasn't a top of the rotation deal that a lot of people thought. After that, I guess you're relievers. You have David Robertson's out there. You have Kenley Jansen who's out there. Which Kenley is an interesting one because he was pretty good, man, for the 2 years he was in Boston. Like he's still a legitimate closer, and yet we're still sitting there. And you had Kirby Yates, who also was pretty good, all-star, and signs a 1-year deal. So I don't know. It's there's still some mysterious guys out there. What I'm saying.
Yeah, and like a guy like Andrew Heaney is a guy who I thought would have a reason, that like back end starter who you can rely on for innings. It has a little bit of upside still after the years he's put in Texas. Like that type of player, I think that guy separates himself from some of the other guys who signed like the 1 year, $11 million deals. And we haven't seen much of a market for him either. So there are still some guys out there. I mean, Pivetta still is really interesting to me because we have to assume that he is really getting screwed over by this qualifying offer by now, don't we? Yeah, that the team that would sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal to see what he's got in terms of if trying to translate that pure stuff into a sub-4 ERA doesn't want to give up the draft pick to do it.
Yeah,
because a lot of teams that might take that leap, a team like Tampa Bay, a team like Baltimore, are teams that kind of hoard those draft picks as closely as anyone else.
You know what's interesting is that when you look at the Red Sox offer him the qualifying offer, which is what I wrote, run $21 million for the year, and yet they don't. He doesn't sign there. But they get Walker Buehler at basically the same thing. I'm going to find this really, really interesting to compare those two. Like, I think obviously Walker Buehler has more of a track record as a starter, but he didn't have a good year, showed signs at the end. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. Maybe comparing them with Flaherty, all these guys that are signing shorter term deal. Who is going to be the guy that picked the right guy? Mm-hmm. So, and even let's throw Max Scherzer in there. All right. Congratulations, Max. You're in Toronto.
And then, of course, as a guy who covers the Mets, got to wonder where Jose Iglesias is going.
I was going to reach out to him because I feel like it's been a few hours since he last promoted his song. I don't know if you saw, probably not. You were parenting. We had Mike Vassell on.
Oh, okay.
And Mike, which I is another really going to be really as someone who covers the Mets, you should keep one eye on Mike Vassell because he's going the Rays. Yeah. All of a sudden now he's going to win the Cy Young because he's going the Rays as a Rule 5 guy. It's throw strike one, but it's different when you hear it from the Rays.
Yeah, throw it down the middle and everything will work out great.
It's the magic. It's the secret sauce. But he was talking about how his car rides with Jose Iglesias, how he was the one convincing him, first convinced him that this is going to be a hit, and how they said, the last step of this is that we're gonna take it to the guy who is the biggest country music guy in the clubhouse, and if he likes it, then it's gonna be a hit. And so they did. He couldn't remember who it was, but they did, and he liked it. It's gonna be. So I give all credit for Mike Vassell for helping Jose Iglesias almost get a Grammy. But
this feels like a story I definitely should have reported out more during the course of last season.
It's never too late. It's never right. Spring training's a long time. Although, it's Jose Iglesias. Is he going to get is he going to get a major league deal?
Yeah, I think he ends up with a major league deal, like 1 year, $2.5 million kind of thing at this point.
Major league deals are hard to get.
Yeah,
this time of year. All right. You voted for the Hall of Fame?
I did. Yes.
Okay. You vote for Ichiro?
I did. Yeah, I'm not the one.
Hold on, I'm going down a list of people that I'm asking. Did you make your public? I should know this. Did you make your ballot public?
I did after all the ballots were due. I don't like making it public like before.
Oh no,
everyone's
yeah,
finished
you don't
voting.
like to do the big, highly produced ballot reveal like myself.
No, I'm not as flashy as you, of course.
Well, no one is. Like, it's still baffling why nobody else like has any fun with it. What's going anyway? Anyway, that's another topic for another day. So you have the option. You can check the box of making your ballot public, and it was just the other day they revealed all the public ballots. I think there was. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there was like around 80 people who didn't make it public. Is that right?
I believe it was something. It was like 80%, and then 80 people who had not gone public.
Do you feel, especially off of this Ichiro thing, do you feel like all ballots should be public?
I mean, yes, I think and the BBWA has wanted to make all ballots public. The Hall of Fame has not allowed us to mandate that. So I think yes, as a writer, I think it's important to be transparent with how you're voting. At the same time, like I don't understand this like quest for unanimity in any voting situation. Like that we have that there's people out with torches for whoever didn't vote for Ichiro, the same way they didn't vote for Jeter, or the three who didn't vote for Griffey. Like, I should not know how many people did not vote for Ken Griffey Jr. on the first ballot. I was writing something about, I did a Q&A at some point this season with Andrew Baggerly, our Giants writer at The Athletic. And one Mets fan was still upset in 2024 that Baggerly was the one voter who did not vote for Pete Alonso for Rookie of the Year in 2019. An award that Alonso won easily 5 years prior, and I don't understand why. Like there are a lot of things in the world to focus your mental energy on and your anger at than who has failed to prevent who you want to win an award or to get into the Hall of Fame.
That said, do you think we'll find out who didn't vote for Ichiro?
No, we haven't found out who didn't vote for Jeter. I don't think.
Didn't we? Didn't we? No, we haven't.
No.
Oh, maybe. All right. It's a good point because I think the outrage, if you want to get all worked up over this stuff, whatever. But you also don't just reserve your outrage for that. Also implement your outrage for the people who have these unbelievably fraudulent ballots. And I'm sorry, there are some. Like when you vote for some of these people, or you put one person down, and whatever it is, it's the people who cannot in a million years defend their ballot. That all you have to do is defend your ballot, right? That's all you want. But save your outrage for that too. It's fine. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I get so upset with the people who can't defend. That's all I ask. Defend your ballot. Be able to defend your ballot. And I might not agree with it, but I think that, Tim, we've heard people who have had these ballots and by the way, I'm having outrage when you just said don't have outrage, so I apologize. But they have these weird ballots and they might go on the radio and it's embarrassing, their defense of it. And so like that's not acceptable because it might be a personal thing, or I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Again, I'm giving outrage when you told me not to. I apologize.
No, I mean like it's such a privilege to be able to vote for the Hall of Fame.
That's the
it's
point.
Like I didn't even like conceive of being possible for myself when I was growing up. And
when I was stealing seafood from you, when I was telling you order the seafood at Papados so I could eat it, you said it seems so far away to be able to vote for the Hall of Fame.
And like honestly, I didn't vote the first couple of years I was eligible. I didn't vote for it because I didn't feel like I had the time to put full energy, like the what I needed to do to vote responsibly. And so it wasn't until that like I took the first 2 years off, and then it was the third year. I was like, okay, like I have time to sit down and actually think more deeply about how I want to vote, what principles I want to have, and how I can have a logically consistent ballot, and hopefully one that remains so year after year after year. Because you go through different phases as a baseball. Like I remember growing up thinking like, man, like this guy's a Hall of Fame. Like Craig Biggio is a Hall of Famer,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's like thinking about it, like, yes, obviously he's a Hall of Famer. The guy was good for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing I think that when you do have the responsibility of voting for the Hall of Fame, if you do approach it the right way, you are going to vote for guys that you probably thought I would never have voted for before. Because, and the one that pops to mind for me is Scott Rowland. And the reason was in large part because the war. He had a 70 war. There's nobody's not in the Hall of Fame who had a 70 war. And because before my criteria, when I didn't have a vote and I was trying to seem so smart and holier than thou than all the voters, was all right, let's start with top 10 MVP finishes because that shows a dominance in the era. All right, I still stand by that, but it's not the be all. And to your point, Biggio, like, okay, he's not that guy. So anyway, again, I'm getting worked up when you tell me not to.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone starts as a small hall person. And it's like, yeah, there's like 4 Hall of Famers in baseball, Like I laugh because there's a guy who comments on Baseball Prospectus articles about Clayton Kershaw, that Clayton Kershaw might be a Hall of Famer.
Oh,
like it's a real debatable case.
Oh,
and I think a lot of fans, and not everyone, I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush, but you start kind of in your fandom as like there's only this really select handful, and then when you watch the sport more deeply and grow to appreciate it more, you understand how hard it is to do this on a day-to-day basis for a decade plus, like all these guys have who are on the ballot, and you start to think that, okay, maybe these guys that I wouldn't have voted for in the past, maybe Andy Pettitte or maybe Bobby Abreu, are actually Hall of Famers when you look at it more deeply.
All right. Pete Alonso's going back to the Mets.
Did that break, or are you just predicting?
No. Andy Martino of SNY is just reporting this. All right, so let's talk about Pete Alonso. Do you have to jump off and do work?
No, because I'm still on leave. So okay. I just want to look at if they have the terms of it.
We can keep talking. This is what this is all about. It's live podcasts. So Pete Alonso, yeah, I'm sure we'll get as we continue to talk, we'll get through the terms of but I think that what this is great. I love this because in this time that we're talking, we laid out all the pluses and minuses of Pete Alonso going to the Mets, and now the Pete Alonso has gone to the Mets. And I think that my genius, I really had the pulse of what was going on, where I said the Mets identified that he was the straw that stirred the drink and the glue of this team to make this whole thing go. So, yeah, sorry. You fell short of your 5 years.
You fell short. I noticed that, yes.
2 years includes an opt-out after the first season, according to Jeff Passan and Andy Martino on it. All right, let's talk. Perfect. I'm glad. This is great. Let's talk about it, Tim. Can we? Do you have to put a kid to bed or anything? Or
no. I did that earlier today.
It's perfect timing. I mean, it's like real time reaction.
Yeah.
What's your guttural reaction, Tim Britton?
I think it makes the Mets better. Like I think that's makes the Mets lineup better. You looked at what the Mets had in their lineup, even with Juan Soto, and you said, yeah, that's a really, really good 1 through 4, maybe 1 through 5. You got Lindor, Soto, Nimmo, Vientos in some order. You feel really good about that. Beyond that, you're like, who hits fifth? Is it Francisco Alvarez breaking out? Is it Jesse Winker kind of maintaining what he did last year? Is it Starling Marte finding it again? Is it Jeff McNeil, having a good season again? And so I think, you bring Alonso in, and now it's 1 through 5 is really deep. Now your 5th place hitter might be Vientos. And you give him a little bit of room to not need to be who he was last year. So I think it really upgrades their lineup. It makes the whole team fit better. You're not trying to break in Brett Beatty or Luis Angel Acuna or a recovering Ronnie Mauricio at third base, and you're not switching positions on Vientos. Logically, it always made sense to me, started at the beginning of the offseason, that as long as there wasn't a team like the Nationals, like I mentioned earlier, that was going to pay him more than the Mets were wanted to. That Alonso made the most sense for the Mets. Like the fit there was best. And certainly once those other teams went out and got first baseman, once there was that weekend where everyone signed their first baseman or traded for their first baseman, it seemed like the Mets, other teams could kind of rationalize it. Like Toronto could talk about, well, we could play Vlad at third. We could have them, coexist for a year or so. That it was everywhere else. It was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. The Mets had the square hole that Alonso fit perfectly, and it makes sense for him to go back there.
So
not on terms he wanted, I'm sure.
Well, I was just going to say, not to sound cold-hearted, but this was gamesmanship. We had Steve Cohen at Mets Fest or whatever it was the other day, basically say, "Yeah, whatever, we're good, Pete." And if you look at who won this, the Mets won. I mean, good for him. The Mets won. The Mets, in terms of playing this out, the Mets won, right?
Yeah, like they got better without taking on the long-term risk that a 5-year deal would have entailed. And at the same token, like it's easy to bash Boris in an instance like this. That like he did not, this is a guy who talked about $200 million deal, who threw out Fielder and Teixeira as comps, and obviously this is not that deal. But then you look back at Matt Chapman last year signed the short-term deal and ended up getting 6 and 150, and Blake Snell signed a short-term deal and ended up getting a bigger deal. It hasn't worked out for Jordan Montgomery yet, and hasn't worked out for JD Martinez yet. But Alonso, there is a blueprint for him to follow where, maybe he comes back and hits 44 home runs next year. He opts out and the market's a little bit more robust for him than it had been previously.
So do you think, what's your vibe? He's still a young man. He's 30 years old. And I think that's probably why, well, I don't know if he had a choice, but it shouldn't sting him too much because, to your point, there's still a contract to be had out there, especially with the opt-out after the first year, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to him having a better year than he had in 23 or 24. Otherwise, you could look at like Anthony Rizzo is the opposite, is the other case scenario where a guy who consistently, signed those short-term deals with the Yankees, who had some opt-outs, but was always kind of re-upping for the same amount for a while. And now I believe he's still out there as a free agent. And he's not, he's 34 or something like that. So that's there always is the chance that, Alonso ends up playing out these 2 years, making $54 million and then signing a 2-year, $30 million deal after that. And not getting that huge payday that seemed promised to him just a couple of years ago. But if he has a really good 25, if he has the kind of year that Chapman and Snell had in San Francisco and hits the open market again, maybe Vlad Guerrero's getting $450 million, and it doesn't look too bad to give Alonso $100 million in that context.
All right, I'm going to keep you on for another 2 hours just in case Alex Bregman signs. No, but just the last thing, and I appreciate you staying on. And we were able to do this. It was good. It was fun. I think this is going to be a good listen. I'm saying this, but I mean it. Like the fact that it was real time. We encompassed Pete Alonso's offseason all within one podcast.
It's the first time I've broken down a move in real time on a podcast since the Red Sox traded Wade Miley for Carson Smith.
Oh,
or when they traded for Wade. Wade Miley was involved in the trade. I forget which one of those Wade Miley coming or going.
You were on a podcast when that happened?
Yeah, I was on the much beloved Super 2 podcast of the Providence Journal at the time.
Oh, the Super 2 podcast. I forgot about that. All right. So just the last thing is, do you think that the perception of the Mets, I mean, the obvious answer for this is, the Mets are better. But we know if we're talking about the tiers of the National League, there's the Dodgers, right? And then maybe the Phillies, the Mets. Who else am I missing? Anyone?
Atlanta.
So this focus, the Dodgers are here. Pete Alonso isn't going to change that conversation. But does this change the conversation for the Mets when it comes to Atlanta and the Phillies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd put them right in that. Like, I don't feel confident saying one of those teams is definitively better than the other two, or one of them is definitively worse than the other two. One of the things I wrote last year, right before the trade deadline, was that the Mets the Mets at that point they turned it around for 6 or 7 weeks. They looked like they could be a very good team, but they hadn't done it for very long. And I said they should kind of aggressively buy at the deadline because the National League is not going to afford you this open a field for some time. That was at that point, LA was still struggling pretty mightily in their starting rotation. And like
it's basically what the American League is right now.
Yeah, I mean, like the Dodgers look more like a juggernaut in retrospect than they did feel like for much of last regular season. Atlanta had all the injuries and limped to 89 wins by the end of the season. Like they were not the behemoth that they had been previously. And Philly was very good, but had already started to leak oil in the middle of the season. And wasn't going to win 100 games. There was no 110 win team to beat in the National League. The Dodgers ended up playing like that kind of team come October. But the field was open, and now this year it feels like that mountain's a lot tougher to climb because LA's gotten even better. Philly should be just as good as they were last year. Atlanta should be better when they get Acuna and Strider back by some point in the middle of the season. And the Mets should be better for 6 months than they were last year. They should win more than the 89 games they did and be a threat in October again.
By the way, we another pitcher that's rumored or whatever. We're putting in rumors to the Mets. Dylan Cease. We did a Who Says No trade proposal, which was Dylan Cease and Suarez for Jet Williams
and Suarez. What does Suarez have left on his contract?
1 year, I think. Who says no?
I mean, if they get both of those guys, I'd have to look more deeply at what Suarez did last year. But I don't think the Padres would do a 1-for-1.
Okay. All right. What do you, before I let you go, the terms are out. Your colleague, Will Salmon, has found out the terms for Pete Alonso. Tim Britton, what do you think the terms are?
Well, they're the same as what Jeff Passan reported that I looked up 5 minutes ago. 2 years and $54 million. Yeah.
Well, you're ruining the exercise. I told you, put your phone in a baggie. You're not allowed to do it. $30 million for the first year, second year player option worth $24 million. So, $30 million. Congratulations, Pete Alonso. That's pretty good. Pretty good. All right. Well, thank you for making history.
Thanks for having me on, as always.